Well, hello and welcome to CBN News. My name is Dan Andros, and I'm here with CBN's Will Dawson, who is in Phoenix for the men's final between Uconn and Purdue. Will, I mean, we talked before the weekend, and it went pretty much as you thought it would go, and here we go with the big two Titans in the final game.
This is the matchup that everyone has been anticipating all college basketball season. What's crazy is the randomness of the NCAA tournament. You don't always get the best team to win because there's not a 3-game, 5-game series, 7-game series like the NBA Finals and the NBA playoffs. One game anybody could lose, but this year you do. You have number 1 and number 2, the two best teams that everybody expected, and it's going to be an intense matchup, and I think it's going to be a great game, a great way to finish off the college basketball season.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get into the game, we'll talk about the game a little bit itself. There's a couple things I want to go over. First, we'll get into the women's game as well. The women's championship between Iowa and South Carolina was yesterday. Great game for the most part. We'll talk about that as well. Obviously, all eyes were tuned in to Caitlin Clark. More records set again on viewership. But then we've got some bigger news here, Will, with the coaching world and Calipari, and this has thrown everything after Kentucky lost with the upset this year. People still didn't think Calipari was going to leave, but we had some big news.
Yeah, it's amazing. Everybody expected an eclipse today. Nobody expected an eclipse like this. All of the national media attention is not on the national championship game, but it was on John Calipari leaving Kentucky after 15 years. What an amazing time, amazing career he had there. Really in the first 7 or 8 years. And then the last 5, 6 years, you go from 4 Final Fours, 6 Elite Eights, a national championship to, in the last 5 years, Kentucky has only won 1 NCAA tournament game. The last 5 years, they've had 15 NBA players, and you can't get past the first round, losing to a 14 seed and losing to a 15 seed, respectively. Kentucky fans and the Kentucky administration were ready to move on from Coach Cal. And this college coaching search and the biggest job in college basketball is going to be one that is going to really shuffle the landscape in college basketball.
Yeah, and I saw people talking about this, in the sporting world, and they were saying things like, wow, what a time this is where you have Kentucky, which is one of the premier, if not the premier coaching job, definitely top tier, right? Top 5. Coaching job, and he's leaving to go to Arkansas. No knock on Arkansas, but it's just a smaller, as far as history goes and everything, it's just a smaller, spot. But I don't know. I mean, is this a sign of the times with the portals and everything else?
I think that's absolutely what it is. College basketball has changed. There was a time, a short period of time, when the one and dones, the freshman sensations, the John Walls, the Anthony Davises, you could bring those guys in and compete for a championship right away. They'd leave, and the fans were upset that the players left, but that was just kind of the state of college basketball. The game has changed, like you mentioned, with the transfer portal, NIL. College players and college teams are getting older, and Cal has not adapted to that. And I think it wore thin on not just Kentucky fans, but the Kentucky administration. They wanted him to make a change, and unfortunately it didn't happen. So there are big names that AD Mitch Barnhart, the guy that's going to be in charge of this coaching search, is going to go after. And I've got a few names that I'm pretty sure are going to be one of those.
Well, and I mean, certainly you would think that the guys in this final game, particularly Dan Hurley, might be one on that list, on that short list, especially if they're, I mean, what would lure him out? I mean, you've got Hurley here, right? And they won last year. They won a championship, and they're on the verge of another national championship now. What in the world could make Hurley make the leap from this, where he's having a great run here at Uconn, to want to go to Kentucky?
Well, look, there's no doubt that Uconn has become a blue blood. And since 1999, the last 25 years, Uconn has won, well, they're looking for championship number 6 tonight.
Yeah,
that's unheard of. Kentucky, Kansas, North Carolina, it's taken them 125 years to get 6, 7, 8 national championships. So what's happening at Uconn is unprecedented in the college basketball world. So your question, what would it take to get Dan Hurley to leave what could be back-to-back championships at Uconn in a program and a fan base that loves basketball? Well, money talks, and the SEC has a ton of money. Kentucky has a bunch of money. Hurley right now is making $5.35 million a year. Kentucky would be willing to offer probably an upwards of $10 million a year. So if somebody came to you, Dan, and said, I'll double your salary and you can go work for the most prestigious company out there, which you already do with CBN, of course.
Right.
You would be crazy not to listen to that, right? You'd be crazy not to. So will Dan Hurley listen? Absolutely. Will Mitch Barnhart at Kentucky make that call? You better believe he will. It's not as crazy as people might think. I think there's a real shot that Dan Hurley could be the next coach at Kentucky.
Wow, very, very interesting. And it'll be interesting to see, what happens after. If you get a chance to talk to him, if anybody pops that question to him, we'll see how that goes for him. But I want to dive into real quick before we preview the men's game, because this year it's been different with Caitlin Clark in Iowa. The women's game was last night, and so many eyes. I mean, you had LeBron James posting on X about this, during this game, and everyone was watching. You celebrities at the game again, ratings records again. Ultimately, Iowa falls short. But what did you make of that whole scene and really the whole women's tournament?
Yeah, it's incredible. This year's women's tournament was up over last year. And the numbers just came out for the championship game. 18.7 million people tuned in. Almost 25 million people at the peak during that game. It's ridiculous. In the last 5 years in the NBA Finals, no other NBA Finals game has reached that number. So there is certainly something going on in the women's college basketball game. And it has everything to do with Caitlin Clark. It has everything to do with the rivalry between LSU and Iowa and the undefeated South Carolina Gamecocks. And what a game it was. I think for Iowa fans, they're disappointed that it didn't happen, that Caitlin Clark couldn't cement her legacy on the women's college basketball court, but she already did. Win or lose, she did. And what a great story, too, in South Carolina. They go undefeated. And really, had it not been for Caitlin Clark last year, they would have gone undefeated 2 seasons in a row, most likely, and won 2 championships back-to-back. So, yeah, just an amazing time for women's college basketball. And I don't think it's going to change. The question is, will Caitlin Clark translate to the WNBA in a way that brings viewership to the WNBA? I think that's, we'll see. I think that there's definitely going to be a ratings bump. We'll see if it continues to go forward with the WNBA.
Yeah, it'll really be interesting to see how she plays because, in the WNBA, it's like now you get the best of college that are all there in the WNBA. So she kind of carried that Iowa team, and they, I'm not taking anything away from the other players on the Iowa team. They're good in their own right, but she was clearly the anchor and carrying that team. And you could see it actually in the players in that game, by the way. Some of them at times were like, I better get it to Caitlin and not shoot it here. Whereas South Carolina had a bunch of different people putting up clutch shots. And so now when you transfer that to the pro game, Will, I think it'll be interesting to see how that looks because what I think people underestimate about Caitlin Clark is that she also led the nation in assists. So she's a very good passer when the attention comes to her. So it will be interesting to watch her on a WNBA level because now she'll have higher level teammates around her where her passing skills will be on display. You won't be able to just run, 2 people at her all the time and make her take really tough shots or throw it away. So, but I think the point is people will tune in to see how that looks.
I completely agree with that. I was thinking the same thing while I was watching that game, and that those passes she was making to Hannah Stuelke down in the post as they're running a break just were right on point. I wondered what it would be like if Caitlin was surrounded by that South Carolina team. Would things be different? I'm sure it would be. And the fact that they have Carmilla Cardoso, too, just taking every rebound that could be found. That was the difference in the game. But again, what a game. It was a lot of fun to watch. And I wasn't the only one that thought so.
Yeah. No, you weren't. And that first quarter, particularly when Caitlin Clark had 18 points, it was pretty electric.
Wow.
But and that's when LeBron James was tweeting out and just going like, wow, like this is insane. Look at her game. So yeah, definitely the world's on notice with that. And she's certainly, even Dawn Staley, talked about that after the game, saying that that Caitlin Clark has elevated women's basketball. And she was grateful for that. So very cool to see on all fronts. But you're there for the men's game tonight, Will. So let's take a look. Yeah. You're there in Phoenix. You're there, and the game's starting in just a couple hours. And let's look at the game. UConn, obviously all eyes are on UConn. As you said, you kind of predicted it. As I said last time on Friday, UConn's keeping my personal bracket alive. If I have any hope to finish in the top 80%, I need UConn to win this thing. But what do you make with UConn tonight and just in this game in general?
Well, first of all, I have to congratulate you for going out on a limb like that and selecting UConn. So here's to your bracket going all the way, Dan. Yeah, UConn, man. I'm telling you, they're quite a story, quite a team. They haven't struggled in any of these games. We talked about how Alabama, if they could keep it close at the end, they'd have a chance, and they tried everything they could. But UConn is just too overpowering. They got 5 guys that score in double figures, and you've got a 7-2 guy in the middle, Donovan Kling Kong, they call him. And just from a team perspective, those guys, they move the ball around. They find the open man. They get the open shot. They're efficient offensively. They're efficient defensively. I think they're the number 1 team in the nation in the Ken Pom rankings, which measure offensive and defensive efficiency. And there's just not a better team right now than UConn. If there is any challenge to them, it would be Purdue. And on the other side, you've got Zach Edey, 7'4". By the way, the last time 2 7-footers met in the NCAA championship game, it's only happened one other time, and it was Patrick Ewing and Hakeem Olajuwon. That's how crazy this is.
Wow, it is. And there's Zach Edey there, and he is a monster. He is huge, a very large human being, and you can see it. But you're right, for Purdue, it's interesting because UConn's also got a 7'2" guy who's very skilled. So do those guys cancel out? Does one get the better of it? And then what happens with the rest of the guys? And as you said, just watching UConn, I mean, they have some very skilled players, top to bottom. You watch every guy on that floor, seems like they can make a play. And in games like this, that's what really matters, because teams will try to take away the stars. They'll try to take away the big players, and then it's up to those second and third options to really get the job done.
It is, yeah. Zach Edey, there's no denying his skill, his ability, his dominance. He's the National Player of the Year 2 years in a row. 7'4", just incredible. Like you mentioned, just a large human being. But as much as you can neutralize Zach Edey, Donovan Klingen's going to do it tonight. He was so dominant in that performance against Alabama, just block after block, rebound after rebound. And that's really been Purdue's recipe for success, has been the post play, the domination on the boards, on the glass. They have a couple of really good shooters. They really do. And so the problem with that is that UConn's defense, they're going to run them off the three-point line. Do I think this game is going to be close? Absolutely. I think ultimately what's going to happen, though, in the end is the same thing that's happened with UConn. Again, they're still beating their opponents by 20-plus for this tournament. So I think we're going to see probably a 10-point game. That's my prediction. 80-71. I know I said 10. That's a 9-point game. I'm going with UConn. I think Tristan Newton for UConn is going to be the player of the game. I think that's who, if you don't know what you're looking for, watch Tristan Newton tonight. He's incredible with the ball. He's a guard for UConn, and I think that's your MVP tonight.
All right. Well, I mean, you've been pretty accurate so far, Will, and I got to hand it to you on your predictions, and you've done a good job with that. Now, let's talk. We've talked a little bit about it. Let's talk a little bit about faith. I mean, a lot of times, as we've noticed on CBN, you'll see people on these high levels talking about their faith, being very open about their faith. I think feeling compelled to want to share their faith on such a big stage. They're saying, hey, I've got this opportunity. I'm a Christian. What does God want me to do with this? And, God doesn't want, he's got enough secret warriors on his team here. So he wants people to speak out. And so when you get a platform like this and God gives you that, and so we see that a lot. So who do you think we might see that from? Well, let's start with UConn, because you're predicting UConn to win. If we're going to see any faith proclamations, who do you think it'll be from?
Well, I gave you a sleeper MVP, and that's Tristan Newton. He's the guy that I'm going with, because last year I talked to him after they cut the nets down in Houston, and he was quick to give glory to God. He's the guy for UConn that I'm watching. Over on the Purdue side, you have Caleb Furst. He's a 6'10" guy, and he's somebody that did not get in the game against NC State, and that's because Zach Edey didn't come off of the court. But Caleb Furst is a guy that if Zach Edey, for whatever reason, gets in foul trouble, he's coming in. But an incredible young man, really very mature in his faith. he's a pre-med student too, smart guy. And if you want to talk theology with him, he'll talk it all day long. And then also the other day, we got a quote from Dan Hurley that talked about the ups and the downs of college basketball. He talked about wins and losses and how ultimately, even after the win last year, that he goes and he finds a place to pray and that Christ is his rock. And so for those who are looking for a reason to cheer, if you're not a sports fan, look for guys who are proclaiming Jesus. And it makes it a lot more fun. It actually enables us to do what we do here.
Yeah, it certainly does. And for all of you who are watching, we appreciate you tuning in. And we're glad you're here. And like Will said, I mean, subscribe to CBN on YouTube if you haven't already. Hit the notification bell. We're going live. We're covering lots of things. We were talking the solar eclipse earlier today. Hopefully you didn't burn your eyes out looking for that thing. I know you're in Phoenix, so, I mean, you generally want to look away from the sun anyway. It's so hot there usually. But you probably were pretty far from the path of totality, I would think. I think in Arizona, right?
Oh, yeah. We got a little bit of it. The sun dimmed for a little bit. My wife and kids drove an hour down towards Indianapolis and were able to get 100%. And they said it was amazing. Great experience. Glad they did it. The stars came out and everything. So I'm missing them back home. So hello to them. And yeah, but we didn't get much of that here in Phoenix.
All right, Will. So what are you, as far as, I mean, that's a football stadium there, I guess they're playing in, right? I knew it was a big crowd. Is that what they're?
Yeah, we're here at the Arizona. I just remember where I was. We're here at the Arizona Cardinals Stadium. There were 75,000 people here, so it's very different from what a college basketball arena normally is, and so sight lines are really difficult too when you're shooting the ball. It's a big place.
Yeah, I mean, you need to have that Indiana Hoosiers moment maybe where you roll into that thing and they bring out all the kids are in awestruck, and then he brings out the tape measure and says, the free throw line's 15 feet, the basket's exactly 10 feet. Don't worry about it. But I get what you're saying. You're used to the wall, like in a small gym. You're used to that wall or the first row of bleachers being kind of right there. I mean, these guys are used to obviously a little bigger stadiums than that, but still, it's a lot bigger. So it's kind of plays tricks with you, I think, with your mind when you're trying to shoot stuff. So what do you think the crowd's going to be like as far as who they're rooting for? Is there going to be any edge for anybody there, or is it sort of just going to be who knows?
Well, the other night I was surprised. NC State's crowd, their contingent seemed to be the loudest and the rowdiest. I remember last year when we were here, Uconn's fans were the loudest and the rowdiest, but Purdue got into it late. So I don't have any doubt that this is going to be a wild and electric atmosphere tonight. And when you talk about the goalposts being 10 feet high and the court being 90 feet, you know, both of these teams are ready for this moment. We talked about it. These teams are the two best teams. They have been all year long. Nothing's going to scare them this evening. And I know that we can expect a great win this evening.
Awesome. All right. Well, Will, I appreciate you stopping by. I know you got a busy night ahead of you, covering everything that's going on, and appreciate you stopping by here for a few minutes and breaking this all down for us.
Appreciate it, Dan.
All righty, sir. Take care. And for everybody tuning in again, make sure that you hit the notification bell there and get notified anytime we go live. We would love to have you with us. And for all the things we're covering on CBN News, whether it's what's going on in Israel, whether it's what's going on just outside of the solar eclipse, covered that today. And then in the sporting world, always trying to shine a light on the things that are going on, where people of faith are and how they're interacting and how God's moving in the world. So appreciate you all being here tonight. If you're watching the game, enjoy it. God bless, and we'll see you next time. Okay.